Blog Talk Radio.
You know what? I just figured it out that I was self-muted for that entire segment. Oh, well, it's not you this time, BTR. It's me. Good on you. Oh my God. No, I gotta say that again. Well, it's time for a little update on a few things. Last time I talked about the Phoenix pay system on this show. It was full circle of wagons, fire drill. We're going to fix this. It's all supposed to be fixed by October 31st. Guess what? It's not. Take a look at that. And that's not the only issue the Trudeau government is having problems with the civil service on. Meet the new boss. Now take a look at the Canadian Senate. Everybody's favorite topic of disgust. Thanks to that guy who came to Ottawa and said that his government was going to be all about transparency and accountability. We know where that got us. And him. Take a look at a little review of what the Emperor did, the result, and then we'll look at what's happened since. It's certainly no worse than the way it used to be, that's for sure. the 12 Apostle race to replace Emperor as leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, opposition leader in the House on a permanent role, starting to pick up some steam and odor and rhetoric, led by none other than Dr. Magda Leach. We will discuss what's going on with the CPC Leadership Traveling Roadshow. I'm not hearing so much about bitching about Liberal members of cabinet not being in the House these days. Why that is. Maybe some other members of the House aren't there too often these days? Trying to raise money? Whatever. Oh, excuse me. The Phoenix pay system has been a long, ongoing project, 6 years. And right up to the day the switch was flipped to go live on Phoenix, there were numerous groups saying, don't do it, including the manufacturer, IBM. But the Harper government didn't listen. The Trudeau government didn't listen. And so was born the Phoenix pay system disaster. Over 80,000 employees of the federal government not being paid on time, not being paid properly, or not being paid at all. For going on, for some, 8 months or more. But we were told it was all going to be fixed by October 31st. Well, it's not. I'm looking at an article that was in the Hill Times on November 7th by Rachel Aiello, and she pretty much describes where we're at right now. Public Services and Procurement blowing past its deadline to resolve the disastrous Phoenix pay system backlog issues. Sources say some departments have hired back or brought in department-specific compensation staff to internally deal with the payroll problems. After pledging to clear up the backlog of public service employee pay issues by October 31st, about 22,000 cases are still left. Some departments may have gotten tired of waiting and brought in their own pay help to move along their own employees' files. Now, this is exactly what Phoenix was supposed to eliminate, because the Harper government insisted that there were just too many pay adjusters and scalers and all these people. Why can't this all be done by one system? Well, I think we're seeing why now. There's been speculation that the Treasury Board Secretariat, who of course is in charge of paying the government's employees, was about to give each of the departments the ability to process their own pay again. Talking to members of the two largest unions involved here, PSAC, the Public Service Alliance of Canada, and PIPSEC, the Professional Institute of the Public Service of Canada. They said they would be overjoyed if this happened, but also stunned if it actually did. Now, does this indicate a realization that the government themselves have finally figured it out, that the system is as deeply flawed as they were told all along? Perhaps. But Press Secretary of Treasury Board President Scott Bryson sent out an email and said that the department is not expecting to make such an announcement. And the Treasury Board is committed to working with Public Services and Procurement Canada to ensure the pay issues are resolved and public servants are paid what they deserve and on time. Yeah, well, that's what we've been hearing for more than 6 months. Now, there were a few departments, a few federal agencies that were never going to be on Phoenix, such as CSIS, CSEC, CSE, and National Defense. National Defense was screaming and kicking their way into Phoenix. Now, according to an anonymous source, the Department of National Defense has hired 12 pay advisors, 6 permanently and 6 on contract. This doesn't sound like they have any intention of playing the Phoenix game. PSAC spokesperson said that the Department of National Defense has a bulk of the concerns about the Phoenix system. Now, leading up to the launch of Phoenix last fall, the government laid off over half of the compensation advisors. That's directly from Public Services and Procurement Minister Judy Foote on October 31st. So, of course, the minister said those job cuts made by the previous Conservative government contributed to the pay system issues. Now, the Phoenix system has gone from a yearly savings of $67.2 million to costing the Trudeau government at least $50 million upfront to get it to work. Basically, the only way Minister Foote could explain herself out of it at that time was if the decision had been made not to go for savings initially, that's $70 million, and if in fact the human resources personnel had been left there until the vision was actually achieved, I think we'd be seeing a different situation today. Really outstanding thought. Yet it was you who gave the go-ahead to turn Phoenix on. Now, all the new staffers being hired as pay advisors or compensation advisors do not have access to Phoenix, and they are acting as go-betweens for each ministry's staff and the staff in Miramichi, New Brunswick Pay Center for handling the backlogs. These experts are considered internal and are being hired at the individual ministry's expenses. So that's to cut down on the $50 million that Public Services and Procurement has to put out for their failed system. The president of PIPSEC, Debbie Davio, said she's also heard of a number of departments, including Health Canada and the Treasury Board themselves, bringing back pay experts formerly working within the departments that were part of the layoffs going into Phoenix. So the people that could have fixed all these bugs were laid off before they were on the payroll to fix them. So let's bring them all back. Davio is also saying that it's likely the deputy ministers who would have made the calls to bring in additional help. What she doesn't say is that it would be the same deputy ministers who would have signed layoffs for all the same people. Now, there were already 200 additional pay center employees hired at temporary pay centers in Gatineau and Shawinigan, Quebec, Montreal, and Winnipeg. Halifax and Vancouver also hired more after the fact. Canada Border Services Agency is also not in Phoenix. Now, Deputy Minister of Public Services and Procurement Marie Lemay has been the poster girl for most of the outrage. Not entirely undeserved, in my opinion. There was a briefing a week ago from Deputy Minister Lemay, and she said until the pay backlog, 82% of which predates Phoenix, apparently, is cleared, they can't guarantee that the system will work. So I don't really understand what that means. 82% of which predates Phoenix. So the layoffs were so far ahead of the implementation of Phoenix that they made themselves a big pile of shit before they even tried to run the new system. Outstanding human resources management from the federal government. There is still a lot of work needed to get us to our steady state, and there is no quick fix. That said, we expect steady improvement month over month from now on. But she refused to give a new deadline for the backlogs. Just dropping a hint that the department is mindful of December for tax reasons. Now we're to the point that they're going to be delaying T4s? Ridiculous. At least now the ministry is admitting that if they need more compensation advisors, they will keep some of those brought in temporarily. She's not ruling out adding more permanent pay positions, and there will be a plan, quote unquote, in a few weeks from the ministry on how they're going to get their shit together. She also brought up an issue that it was very important all managers responsible for inputting employee pay information into Phoenix complete the online training. But neither her or the minister could say how many managers had done it. So, what's up with that? Training to do as a manager, you do it. Now, this has been a complaint from the top down since the very beginning of Phoenix that the information was being entered incorrectly to function in Phoenix. Public Services and Procurement have not released how many new cases have come in since July, when shit really hit the fan. Although the number of cases seems lower than what was expected. So how does that, how does that sound? Now, the last quote here from Ms. Davieux of PIPSEC. It seems unclear to me that they actually have a good handle on the numbers. Either they're playing a little bit of hide and seek with the numbers, or maybe things are just changing so quickly they're having trouble tracking them. I don't know, but the numbers seem awry. And to top it all off, Auditor General Michael Ferguson has also noted that the Phoenix pay system's unacceptable delays and errors, and said he will be conducting a major investigation into the project, which is expected to be released in 2018. Oh, the wheels of government turn slowly, don't they, people? Especially when they're looking under their own rocks. So Phoenix is far from operational in a real world standard, but yet it soldiers on. There's nothing else. Employees of the Government of Canada, I hope you are getting paid as you deserve. There has been talk of lawsuits against the federal government for not paying their employees properly. That is a severe violation of collective bargaining. And speaking of collective bargaining, halfway through October, the negotiations between the federal government and PSAC, Public Service Alliance of Canada, hit the news again. PSAC took out print, bus, and radio ads to put Justin Trudeau's words back in his face. Of course, Trudeau sent an open letter to federal bureaucrats telling them that his government wanted a kind of relationship with the hundreds of thousands of federal civil servants, many of whom felt under siege with the previous Conservative government. The PSAC National President Robin Benson said, "It's been a year since the election. The tone has changed, but it's now time for action." Contract talks with PSAC have been going on for more than 2 years. Negotiators went back to the bargaining table in late September after a nearly 3-month break. Brought that on was the Treasury Board, which bargains on behalf of the government, said that it was not prepared to back away from proposed changes to sick leave for approximately 80,000 employees. What the government wanted was allowing 8 days of sick leave annually with the ability to carry over 2 days into the next year. Currently, they get 15 days a year, and they can roll it over in total. Now, what would happen to the approximately 15 million days of unused sick leave that are banked? They would simply be erased. Union asked for 3% a year for 3 years in increase, and the government had offered 0.5%. That's a little bit of a distance. So again, meet the new boss. Oh yeah, we're going to have a very nice relationship. Not like that emperor guy. Yet nothing has changed. There was a time when the federal government would settle with their unions quickly as possible because it sent a message to the entire world that Canada is a place where management and labor can get along, we get shit done, we work out our problems. This is a safe place to bring your money. Now? Not quite. Not quite. But hey, that's all right. Phoenix will go on. I guess we can look forward to the Auditor General's report in 2018. Hope it's working by then. Any bigger developments on Phoenix? I'll get them on the air. That's where we stand right now. It's nowhere near fully operational. They've had to bring back staff. It's cost a shitload of money. Now they're hiding how much money by making individual ministries hire people to help public services in procurement with their shit system. Does it sound like a whole lot has changed? It's not just the difference between the conservatives and the liberals. It's the same civil service. It's the same assistant deputy ministers. It's the same department heads. Listeners will know that every time I've had retired Colonel Pat Stogren on the show, that's been his biggest complaint across the board. It's not government. It's not the party that's elected to sit as government that is actually responsible to change the way the government works. It's the people who have a lifelong career in the government. That's where you have to start. Now, there are those that would argue that the unions themselves are the ones who protect all these people. Yes and no. We saw what the Harper government did with ADMs and DMs, deputy ministers, by offering them bonuses for not spending their whole budget. Takes two to tango. Now, do you think the union was in on those agreements when they were struck? I would think not. Sunny ways, my friends, sunny ways. The Canadian Senate. That much maligned mess is starting to reinvent itself. Now, once upon a time, there was a fake cowboy who came to Ottawa and said, "The Senate is useless. We are going to reform it all by ourselves. And I think it's useless." Well, after a Supreme Court loss or two, and after having a minority government forced into proroguing Parliament to prevent a non-confidence vote over hidden files about torture in Afghanistan, Emperor decided that it was time to fill some of them Senate seats, or his little dream empire may end sooner than he had thought. On December 22nd, 2008, Stephen Harper made the bulk appointment to the Senate that he will be forever infamous for. Mike Duffy, Pam Wallen, Nancy Green-Rain, Patrick Brazeau, a defeated Conservative MP, Fabian Manning, the Vice President of the Conservative Party, Michael MacDonald, Irving Gerstein, legendary bagman, and leader of the Conservative Fund. All these people went in at once. With Brazeau from Quebec, we got Suzanne Fortin Duplessis. Anybody in Quebec ever heard that name before, Duplessis? Leo Husakos, who is now being a royal pain in the ass because he's still there. Michel Rivard. Michael Fortier, of course, was the first foray in 2006, who was a sitting senator and was brought into the cabinet because Harper had no MPs in Quebec in 2006. Fortier said he would step down and run for MP to legitimize himself at the next election. Well, he lost. But here we have a prime minister under extreme pressure to even keep his government afloat, insisting that the Senate was useless. He had no time for it, making 18 appointments to help secure his tenure. No other reason. Well, that 18 was part of a second announcement from 2007, or from 2008, sorry. And they became known as the class of 2009. 18 new senators that were announced in December was a one-day record. But previous to that, there were 9 more. Alphabetically, we'll take a look at them and see what the Senate had truly become at the end of the Harper experiment. Patrick Brazeau. After the 2006 election, which Patrick Brazeau had supported the Conservatives, he became the national chief of the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples. He was the 3rd youngest senator ever. And the memorable quote that came from Patrick Brazeau at the time was, "I was essentially offered a backroom deal." Outstanding. Claude Carignan, who is still haunting the halls, he ran for the Conservatives in the 2008 election and lost. So that's how he became a senator. He ran for the Conservatives and lost. He was the leader of the government in the Senate at the end of the Harper reign, taking over from Marjorie Le Breton, another outstanding senator of record. Now, opposed to what Brazeau says, where he just, said flat out it was a backroom deal, Claude Carignan said, he doesn't like it when people interpret offers made out of friendship that are misinterpreted as backroom deals. Talk about the old boys club. Jacques Demers got in. And what was Jacques Demers' qualifications to be in the Canadian Senate? I have no idea. Coached the Habs to a Stanley Cup. Coached the Israeli national hockey team. I guess he was from Quebec and people knew his name. So better make him a Conservative senator. Ridiculous. Mike Duffy. Mike Duffy. What more can be said? I don't think we even have to start. Mike Duffy. That's all I have to say. Nicole Eaton. Who is Nicole Eaton? Well, she was a fundraiser for the Conservative Party. Her memorable quote is listed as calling the beaver, Canada's national symbol, a dentally defective rat. Her favorite whipping boy is environmental charities. Doug Findlay, the late Doug Findlay. He was campaign director for the Conservative Party in 2006 and 2008, both elections of which the Conservative Party pled guilty to election fraud and paid fines. He was the director of political operations for the Canadian Alliance Party in 2003, and is the husband to Diane Findlay. Suzanne Fortin Duplessis, previously mentioned. She was an MP in the Progressive Conservative government of Brian Mulroney. And she raised funds and worked for the Conservatives during the 2008 election. So that's good enough to get you to be a senator. Linda Frum. One of probably the most disliked current day senators by people from all sides of the spectrum. The sister of David Frum, former speechwriter to U.S. President George W. Bush. a well-known Israel supporter, a well-known right-wing reactionary. Irving Gerstein, longtime chair of the Conservative Fund Canada. Him and Doug Finlay were the ones who wiggled out of going to prison. And he was also named in some of the RCMP paperwork on the Nigel Wright, Mike Duffy affair as one of the few people who knew. Stephen Green. Who is Stephen Green? A two-time defeated Reform Party candidate and former Chief of Staff to Preston Manning. He thinks that 3 of the Maritime provinces should merge. Nancy Green Rain. Olympian Nancy Green. What are her credentials? Well, she was a member of the Reform Party and the Conservative Party, and she's got a name. Leo Sakos. Joined the Progressive Conservatives Youth Wing at the age of 16. He was a ministerial staffer in the Mulroney government in 1992. Ran for the Canadian Alliance in 2000 and lost. A fundraiser for the Conservative Party in Quebec. He has been under investigation from the Senate Ethics Watchdog, and he was named in the Quebec Charbonneau inquiry. Not exactly squeaky clean. Now Leo is one of the major mouthpieces for the Conservatives in the Senate. Michael MacDonald. He was the executive assistant to Nova Scotia Premier John Buchanan and a former vice president of the Conservative Party of Canada. In 2012, he was actually the most frugal senator from Nova Scotia. His expenses were only $178,000 for the year, on top of his $130,000 salary. Fabian Manning. Talk about a party hack. Former Progressive Conservative MLA in Newfoundland, 3 times ran for the Feds. He won in 2006. He was defeated in 2008. He was right away appointed to the Senate. He resigned from the Senate to run again in 2011. He lost. Guess what happened? Reappointed to the Senate. What kind of bullshit is this? Yeah, it's just all these other people. All they ever did is run for the Tories and lose. You know, it's just looking through them here. It's just, who are these people? Nobody knew who they were then. Nobody knows who they are now. But they got a steady gig. No, until we get to just about the end of the alphabetical order. Carolyn Stewart Olson, former press secretary and director of strategic communications to Prime Minister Harper. Also worked for Preston Manning when he was leader of the Reform Party. Her biggest complaint was the hectic schedule that forced her to step down from a Senate subcommittee or two. Oh my God. The Senate's hectic schedule. Unbelievable. Pamela Wallin. She's been on the government payroll since 2002, when Jean Chrétien appointed her Canada's Consul General in New York City. There was a time when Senator Wallin was regarded as a firebrand. She quotes when Senator Stuart Olson and Senator LeBreton could not abide the fact that I was outspoken in caucus or critical from time to time of their leadership, or that my level of activity brought me into the public eye and once garnered the praise of the Prime Minister. They resented that. They resented me being an activist senator. These are people who are supposed to be, empty nesters. They got their job till they're 75. They're supposed to be mature adults, concerned with what's become cliche, the silver second thought for the government. This is the kind of bullshit they bring up. Oh, the boss mentioned me, he didn't mention you. Oh, let's screw her over. Jesus Christ. Bunch of fucking simpletons. But I guess this is what happens when you appoint people based on their duty to the party instead of actually giving a shit about Canada. Thanks, Harper. Appreciate it. Oh, well, not really. So, when the Liberals campaigned, because, since the Duffy thing broke, Harper refused to appoint another senator. So we were left with, somewhere around 40 vacancies. He didn't care. He's the one who created the bonfire in the Senate by appointing all those jackasses anyway. So that was it. We're not playing there anymore. I don't like it. The Liberals campaigned on reforming it, quote unquote, cleaning it up. When Justin Trudeau was still leader of the or not even, was leader of the Liberal Party, he told all the Liberal senators that they're no longer in caucus. They are what became known as Liberal independents. That was about as far as he could get from the Senate as possible. And it worked out for the most part. But as the year comes to a close, things have started to pick up. You go back to late September, and the word was out. The Liberals were expected to appoint 20 new senators within weeks. Now, this was after a first wave that was done by the new Independent Senate Advisory Board or such. Now, there was 7 new senators in March of 2016. And they were not just all Liberals. There were NDP and there were PC. So there are 20 more to come. Of course, the previously mentioned Leo Housakos, who is now a former Senate Speaker, and he is chair of the Chamber's Internal Economy Committee, has been critical of the Liberals' Senate proposal, saying the new dynamic in the upper chamber will make the operations more difficult. Housakos said it's hard to operate in the British parliamentary system without clusters and caucuses. And all he really does with his statement is call into question that Justin Trudeau is lying. He's going to appoint liberal hacks and bagmen without calling them that. Well, I guess go for what you know, Leo. Independent Advisory Board for Senate Appointments. That is the correct name. The Privy Council office has confirmed that the government has indicated that it intends to fill the current Senate vacancies by the end of 2016. That he did. He took the next step. We had 7, now we have 9 more that were appointed at the end of October. This is certainly a change. Now, who do we have in the newest 9? Now, this should obviously show you a little bit of difference in what's going on. Is he going to change things overnight? No. Is it the most we've seen from any government in our lifetimes? Yes. So the 9 new senators representing British Columbia, Yuen Pa Wu, came to Canada as a 16-year-old student on scholarship, immigrated later, and is a big player in the Asia Pacific Foundation in Vancouver, and has a 28-year history of work on public policy issues from coast to coast with an emphasis on Asia relations. He's a senior fellow at the Institute of Asian Research at the UBC, and also has a fellowship at Simon Fraser. Well, I don't see anything about party fundraiser or failed candidate. Okay. From Manitoba, we have art historian Patricia Bovey. She is a fellow at the Royal Society for the Arts in the United Kingdom and has served on the boards of the University of Manitoba, the National Gallery of Canada, and the Canada Council for the Arts. Don't see anything there about working in the Prime Minister's office previously. Also for Manitoba vacancy, Harvey Max Chochinov, professor of psychiatry at the University of Manitoba and the director of the Manitoba Palliative Care Research Unit. He was named to chair a recent federal advisory panel as Trudeau's government was considering what became known as Bill C-14. Another person who has done a lot of service to Canada, not their party. The 3rd senator to arrive from Manitoba is Professor Marilou McPhedran. She's a lawyer who has worked to promote human rights through law reforms in Canada and internationally. In 1985, she became the youngest lawyer named to the Order of Canada for leadership in an ad hoc committee of Canadian women on the Constitution. From New Brunswick, we have René Cormier, an advocate of Francophone rights among Atlantic Canadian Acadian communities. Awful lot of work through culture and arts. The other New Brunswick seat goes to Nancy Hartling. She's a dedicated advocate on issues affecting women. She raised 2 children as a divorced mother and has completed 2 university degrees and founded the nonprofit organization Support to Single Parents Incorporated. She has won a Governor General's Award for advocacy, as well as provincial awards, including the Order of New Brunswick. From Nova Scotia, Wanda Thomas Bernard, a social worker, an educator, a community advocate, a community activist, a longtime Dalhousie University social work professor, and founding member of the Association of Black Social Workers. She was the first African Canadian to be promoted to full professor at Dalhousie and has been awarded the Order of Nova Scotia and Order of Canada. Also from Nova Scotia, Daniel Christmas, a resident of the Mi'kmaq First Nation in Member 2, a lifelong advocate of Indigenous rights, Director of Advisory Services for the Union of Nova Scotia Indians, Coordinator of Litigation Strategy on Aboriginal and Treaty Rights. He has an honorary doctorate of law from Dalhousie. Prince Edward Island, Diane Griffin, former Deputy Minister of Environment in PEI. Is awarded the Governor General's Conservation Award, an honorary degree from the University of Prince Edward Island. She's been involved with the Nature Conservancy of Canada since 1999. So, do you see a difference in what qualifies these people to be in the Senate of Canada as compared to what Harper did? So, people who bitch about the Senate, useless it is. Keep that in mind. At least with people in there who know what they're doing and why they're there, other than to either tour the country on the public dime to fundraise or to fundraise silently and hold down a government job. I don't see that in this latest 9, nor did I see it in the 7 before. So now the independent Senate board is on their own after this second round. There are more to come before the end of the year, 5 for Ontario, 5 for Quebec, and this will give the senators without party affiliation the majority. Even counting all the Conservatives Harper stuck in there, and the Liberals that Trudeau cut loose from caucus. True independence will be more than either one of them. So, this is, in my opinion, this is what the Senate was meant to be, or needs to be. Not meant, it was designed to be a place for appointments. Our people. We've seen the same thing in the United States forever. Still do. But Canada is making a change. This is part of the job of Minister Monsef as Minister of Democratic Institutions. So far, from where we started, I can't really complain. I'm sure there will be a shitstorm about the Ontario and Quebec appointments, regardless of who they are, because that's just how things work. But that's fine. At least these people have some real shit on their resume. That's a change. Oh, yes, here we go. Yeah. Chat room misbehaving. Chat room misbehaving. Oh, well. All right. We've reviewed Phoenix. We reviewed the Senate. What we have left is the Conservative circus. Considering where they started, where they're going, the number involved, it looks, at this point, kind of like what we saw in the United States about 16 months ago with the Republicans. And there's more similarities than that. But we're going to take a little break. Host needs a break. And considering, we'll start with our little story, this is a suitable tune. Yes, of course it's Canadian. Thank you for listening to The View Up Here. We'll be back in about 5 minutes.
You are listening to The View Up Here with Canadian Glenn. Call in now. 929-477-3894. Now back to the show.
Welcome back. just barely made it back myself. Better check on that rowdy chat. Yeah, I know. The Trump bug has come north. I know. This is going to be interesting. See if how many Americans notice how their media is going to change. It'll remain just as bombastic and unrealistic, but I think we may see a narrowing of focus. We'll see. Now, the leadership contest of the Conservative Party of Canada is now in full flail. So far, we have 12 leadership candidates. They've been through their first two debates. There will be a bilingual debate coming up next. They started off in Saskatoon at the Delta Bessborough. The lady in Saskatoon, that's a legendary old hotel. I've actually stayed there. But, you know, we are talking Saskatoon. There's not a whole lot of landmarks anyway. But it is a great place. That was where the first debate was. Now, before the debate happened, people were wondering what we were going to see. We have current MPs, we have former cabinet ministers, we have defeated MPs, a former Speaker of the House, one 19th century social conservative, and a couple physicians. Now, the Saskatoon debate, having 12 participants for a 2-hour debate, was pretty regimental. There was not a lot of room to expand off what they were proposed. I mean, everybody got a very short opening statement. And then there were 12 questions asked to all 12 of them. So it was basically 30 seconds a crack for them to get their message out. Now that's a little strange. 30-second opening statement. 40-second response 12 times. What were the questions on? Well, they were pre-established. The economy, trade, immigration, and environment. The rest of the questions, 4 of them, would be submitted from the audience and members. No posters or signs inside the debate room. No noisemakers. So they did try to keep it civilized. Now, what's it take to get into this race? Leadership hopefuls need to pony up $100,000 to qualify for the leadership election on May 27th, 2017. At least $25,000 of the $50,000 entry fee was required to officially enter the race and participate in the first debate, with the second $25,000 required before candidates could get a copy of the party's membership lists. So, if you want to be in the debate and you want the membership list, $50,000. Let's have it. That is non-refundable. A $50,000 refundable compliance deposit is due by the end of 2016. So we're likely to see a couple, if not more, drop out by the end of this year. So who did we have in Saskatoon? Alphabetically, we had Chris Alexander, Maxime Bernier, Stephen Blaney, Michael Chong, Kelly Leach, Dan Lindsay, Deepak Obrai, Aaron O'Toole, Lisa Raitt, Andrew Saxton, Andrew Scheer, and Brad Trost. This debate was the day after the U.S. election. So, of course, the question before the debate were what the candidates thought about it. Most of them just simply tried to, give a generic and say it was a result of economic anger. But be afraid, it's coming to Canada. Aaron O'Toole was quoted as saying, Donald Trump was able to tap that frustration of people who were shut out of the American economy. I want to make sure Justin Trudeau's government doesn't shut Canadians out like we've seen in the U.S. What? The Kelly Leach team, led by Nick Cavalis, who I'm not even going to talk about, that's a whole show in itself, sent an email early Wednesday morning saying Trump's victory was an exciting message that needs to be delivered in Canada as well. When interviewed at the Bessborough before the debate, she said, elites and the media have been disconnected from the people. This is a former Conservative cabinet minister talking about elites and the media. Okay. Leach added that due to her position on immigrant screening, she'll be able to have a working relationship with President-elect Trump. We have some common interests. I know he'll respect me. Yeah, okay, Kelly. I guess that guy that goes around demeaning women, if they're, in his view, less than a 9, they're useless. Yeah, I'm sure he'll respect you, Ms. Leach. Okay. However, Ms. Leach did note she had some concerns regarding Trump's comments on women and people with disabilities, but said she needs to put her personal opinions aside, like any Canadian leader. No, that's what Tony Soprano does. Not a leader of the Canadian people. You Stepford, pain in the ass. Another question that came up is, what about NAFTA? What about NAFTA? Deepak Obrai said, I think that is a very big threat to Canada. We are a trading nation. NAFTA has been very good, to say he does not understand the value of NAFTA. Really? I think there would be a fair amount of people in Ontario that would care to differ with that, Mr. Obrai. Of course, Maxime Bernier, the burn it all down absolute laissez-faire proponent out of the gang, sees the potential renegotiation of NAFTA as an opportunity for Canada. Why? He wants to eliminate supply management. It would allow more competitiveness in the dairy and poultry markets, which he says would lower prices for consumers. How many Canadian farms? More Canadian farms would it bankrupt? Do Canadians want to buy milk from thousands of miles away because it's 3 cents a liter cheaper? Fuck off, Maxime. Fous-toi. The only notable comment from The former worst Speaker of the House in the history of the nation, Andrew Scheer, emphasized the need to focus on a positive campaign, something the Conservatives failed to do last fall. That's what I think voters were missing from us. If we do focus on the positive, we can win in 2019. These guys are insane. Now, to the media, of course, wanted to get all over the Kelly Leach, Donald Trump crush in Saskatoon. But as the debate went on, the early economic questions didn't find much difference from the usual crap we heard out of the Harper government for 10 years. Control government spending, cut internal trade barriers, spur economic growth by lowering taxes. We've heard all this before. We've lifted. It don't work, okay? All 12 said they support free trade. And many admitted that with Trump elected in the United States, the TPP may now be dead. And that is, in fact, the news that is being trumpeted all across social media out of left spectrum United States. All I'll say about that is it ain't going to happen now, but it ain't dead. These trade agreements are never dead. They just keep coming back. For now, TPP is dead. Remember, every nation that signed the memorandum at TPP has 2 years to pass it through their legislative process. So, I mean, whoever's president of the U.S., it makes no difference if they're for or against. Their vote doesn't decide it. It will be Congress in the United States. And to answer the question in chat, did anyone mention fair trade? Well, of course not. Fair trade doesn't exist in their vernacular, only free trade. Lisa Raitt said that news Canada may be willing to reopen. Pause, and she wanted to know what the Trudeau government was planning. Well, again, this is making it sound like this is a Trudeau government initiative to reopen NAFTA. No, it's not. If the largest of the three partners says we're going back to the table, you don't have a lot of choice. Or they end the deal. It's up to you. Lisa Raitt said, we need to win because trade matters can't wait for 3 years. I believe that I can win in 2019. Okay, good for you, Lisa. Kelly Leach tried to play up repeatedly during the debate that she would have a good working relationship with President Trump. Based on what? We have some common ideas, she said. Although she later clarified to reporters that she's never actually endorsed him. I plan on being tough on him when it comes to NAFTA. Yeah, okay, Kelly. Sure thing. Another email that came from Mr. Kovalis to Conservative Party members. Candidate Kelly Leach said, our American cousins throughout the elites, calling this an exciting message and one that we need delivered in Canada as well. This is Tea Party bullshit. Yeah, drain the swamp. Jamie Dimon for Secretary of Money. Yeah, okay. That's draining the swamp, sure. Leach and Stephen Blaney stuck with this protecting Canadian values. Stephen Blaney flat out wants to ban wearing the niqab. Blaney said, I want to make sure that new Canadians understand our core principles. The more they get it, the faster, the better they will integrate. Candidate Michael Chong disagreed. He issued a statement Wednesday calling Leach's policy of singling out newcomers for more screening a losing strategy. The right approach is to quit playing politics with this file, he said during the debate. While he too believes in paying attention to the concerns real people face in their everyday lives, Chong told CBC News, anybody who wants to mimic Donald Trump's election tactics is not being helpful to building a big tent conservative movement. Well, I have to agree with him there. Even Maxime Bernier told CBC, that's her debate. That's not my debate. We have strong screening here in Canada. Maybe Leach thinks she is running for the Republican Party. Nice one, Maxime. Pat O'Brien took the good masses immigrant angle, if you will. He reflected on his own experience as an immigrant and said that being referred to as a good example of immigration by people in his party disturbed him and made him feel unwelcome. So he's all for the faster the better. This is Deepak Oberai's quote. If somebody wants to wear a niqab and be marginalized, it's their problem. I really don't give two hoots. A Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian. Using a line that Justin Trudeau used in the election campaign. Now, there was a good point from a bystander with interest, Vancouver businessman Rick Peterson, who may be joining this race, said to CBC News, the road that Stephen Blaney and Kelly Leach are going down is catastrophic. There are no conservatives in urban ridings in Canada because of that. Apparently, according to him, the only urban ridings in Canada are in Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver. You see a common mindset from these conservatives. They talk about the nation, but it sounds like they're only concerned with their own goddamn party. And to respond to chat, yes, I do care who wins this. Because despite everything that Harper did, whoever leads this party into the next election, they are the ones who are going to decide if this party is ever relevant again with what happens, in my opinion. So yeah, it matters who wins. As far as a carbon tax goes, Michael Chong is pretty much on his own on this one. O'Brien said a carbon tax was not a Canadian solution, whatever the hell that means. Chris Alexander said it was regressive and hurts vulnerable Canadians. This from the snitch line guy. Leach said that she would abolish it the day she becomes Prime Minister. It's like this Trump talk. Well, the day I'm elected, this is going to change. No, it's not. You're full of shit. That's not how things work. Leach, same thing. The day you become Prime Minister, you don't abolish shit. You're not a president. This is what they're selling. Andrew Scheer said, it is economic madness when other countries around the world are abandoning the idea of a carbon tax. Really? Who? And then we have, of course, our 19th century representative, Brad Trost. The concentration on climate change was not needed because, as far as he's concerned, it's more of a political issue than a science issue. Maxime Bernier was proud to argue against supply management that regulates prices in Canadian dairy, egg, and poultry sectors. Now, that position is contrary to what the Conservatives endorsed at their convention in Vancouver last spring. Fellow Quebec MP Stephen Blaney told him, "Maxime, your plan is a disaster, blinded by ideology," accusing him of financing his campaign on the back of farm families. Kelly Leach joined in. "Our membership voted in Vancouver that we would support supply management. Unlike other candidates in this race, I respect the party membership and the decisions the party membership has made." So all 12 of these contestants have paid at least $25,000, non-refundable, to get into this. Peterson is rumored to be joining soon. Former MP Pierre Lemieux has also declared he will be a candidate, but has not yet filed papers. And of course, the true Canadian Trump, Kevin O'Leary, attended, sitting there looking like he smelled something bad because, he can do everything so much better. Moncton is where the bilingual debate is coming up this month. 3 more after that. One of them will be in French with no translation. And some riding associations organize additional events. And there was one in the riding of Skippy, Pierre Poilievre, a week after this. I'm just looking through Conservatives in this race seem to think they're going to grow beyond their, 27 to 30% old stock Canadians. Well, Michael Chong said nixing the party membership fee would help attract younger people, new Canadians, and urban downtown dwellers that the party so badly needs. "We need to build a much bigger Conservative party," Chong said. Deepak Oberoi agreed with that. "We need to build the base." Well, just, I understand that if you shit in a paper bag and write free on it, somebody will take it. But just because the membership to your party is free doesn't mean you're going to attract people who believe in your rhetoric. Andrew Saxton said, "The Conservatives must be more than an opposition party. We need to be a proposition party. We must offer a relevant contrast to Justin Trudeau." Former Speaker Andrew Scheer warned against the Conservatives becoming liberal light. Now, isn't that ironic, considering that Trudeau is nothing but Harper light? When Chong did bring up the carbon tax in Saskatoon, he was booed by the audience, because Chong also believes that that would give the Conservatives a credible position on tackling climate change and attracting new supporters. To which Brad Trost replied, "I don't believe climate change is a real threat." Okay. Ridiculous. Now, what happened in Ottawa? Actually, Greeley, Ontario is the official dateline. As I said, it was hosted by Pierre Poilievre. It was a much larger crowd than they were counting on. I saw a picture of it. Nothing but white faces, a lot of gray hair, a lot of white hair. Again, there must have been a foul odor in the air from the looks on the faces of just about everybody in there. That's their base. That's what they want to grow out from. Not with the same message, boys and girls. Sorry, not going to happen. But in Greeley, there were a lot more longer response opportunity. Not only were there only 9 candidates there, not an official debate, but it was very different than Saskatoon. There was a question about corporate subsidies. Now, Michael Chong took the tangent that some of the largest corporate welfare programs are green subsidies and green programs. And he said that is not the conservative way to reduce emissions. I believe that climate change is a real threat and that we have to have a credible, market-based, conservative solution to reduce emissions. Again, he was booed south of Ottawa to shouts of no. He carried on. So what that means is putting a price on carbon, using all the revenues to introduce one of the largest income tax cuts in Canadian history, and getting rid of all the green regulations, green subsidies, and green programs. That is the conservative way. Really. The root of the word conservative is conserve. So by eliminating all environmental law, that will help conserve. Okay. When Brad Trost answered the question about this, he said, "I don't believe climate change is a real threat," to which the crowd laughed and clapped. The biggest subsidy that needs to go, according to Brad Trost, was the $1.2 billion to the CBC. To get an idea of the people who attended this, HuffPo talked to some of the people in the crowd. Catherine Adams, a self-employed grandmother from Lanark, Ontario, that she's unsure about climate change. I find the left are bullies. David Suzuki calls skeptics climate change deniers, which she finds very negative. The word denier is associated with the Holocaust, as in a Holocaust denier. So you are that evil, and I object to being called that. How anybody puts together climate change and the Holocaust, I have no fucking idea. But this is the power of false equivalency, and it's why it's being used ad nauseum in today's society. But yet she is a self-described environmentalist. She has an organic garden and avoids burning gas by working from home. I believe in having a light footprint on the planet, but at the same time, I have not seen the evidence of global warming. Okay, well, throw another log on your fucking fire and go online. Granny. Stittsville, Ontario resident Nancy James said she doesn't think climate change is the issue that politicians think it is. I don't believe in climate change at all either. It's almost become a religion to people. It's gone too far. Yeah, we have to protect what we have. Recycling and all that other good stuff. That's fine, but the billions of dollars we're pouring into this, it could be spent somewhere else. Reflecting on what Brad Tross said, it might not be welcome throughout the country, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. Yeah, seeing a similarity here between these people and Trump supporters. Shane Brownlee from Carleton Place, Ontario, thought Brad Trost and Michael Chong are both presenting positions that are unsellable. Wrong position to take. He's going to alienate a lot of the younger millennials right off the bat when you say that. He agrees with Chong that climate change is a problem, but he doesn't support the carbon tax. The carbon tax, no, but more measures need to be taken for the environment, I think. Well, you got an answer? Chris Alexander, after the debate, told reporters that Trost is the only one that dismisses climate change. Point out that the new Liberal government ended up adopting the previous Conservative government targets for greenhouse gas emissions, which are unreachable. And Alexander said, the debate is over how we achieve these goals. Well, we won't, so carry on. This was the first hint that we have seen in the House now that Ron A. Ambrose is saying that, oh my God, Trump's president, he's not going to have a carbon tax. We're getting left behind. Alexander was the first to hint at this after the Greeley debate when he said it will generate revenues, but it likely won't reduce emissions that much, and it will hit lower income and elderly Canadians the hardest and affect the country's competitiveness vis-a-vis the United States. Now, Deepak Oberoi actually got fairly progressive for him, addressing climate change. And he has been to the Pacific, the South Pacific, where there's all kinds of real, live evidence of what's happening. Oberoi said, climate change is a reality. If you are to deny this reality, you are not living up to this time. Oberoi opposes a carbon tax, but suggested Canada focus on a new industry, relatively new. Recycling nuclear material for carbon-free electricity generation. Andrew Saxton just merely said that carbon tax is wrong. He believes in climate change. That's it. They're splitting up into different camps on different issues. Yes, I agree with the comments in chat. The person with the small footprint was the grandmother who said that, environmentalists are Nazis. But she insists she has a small footprint and recycling will help save the world. Yes, Amy McPherson did do a whole whack of stuff on Kelly Leach and the Lake Huron radioactive waste storage. Leach is very involved with that. Something that, nobody dares ask, apparently. But Kelly Leach did not make it to the Greeley, Ontario debate. There was some issue of someone apparently breaking into her home. A security alarm sounded at her home. But of course, anyone who would think that Nick Cavalis could be playing a game, of course, Nick Cavalis was the first one to suggest it could be politically motivated by someone other than you, Nick. Interesting. Now, Leach was at the luncheon before the debate, but she left before the debate. Was it about missing questioning about her crush on President-elect Trump? Perhaps. But Pierre Poilievre told the CBC after the festivities were done that Leach had given advance notice she would not be able to stay for the debate. Interesting. Dr. Leach did indeed indicate the night before that she could not attend the debate, but would attend the lunch. Interesting. Later Sunday night, the Leach campaign issued a statement detailing what OPP believe may have been a break-in attempt. Leach said, "I have received a number of threats during the course of my time in public life. They are, nevertheless, disquieting. No nature of the threats was issued. This weekend, I was notified by a volunteer in our local riding association that someone was purporting to know my address and was offering it up online to anyone who was interested in doing me harm." Ms. Leach said this threat was reported to the OPP on Friday evening. Later that night, her home alarm sounded and she left her house and called police, who speculated that someone had tried to gain entry through her garage, but then left. My campaign team is taking further steps at my expense to enhance security at my home and on the campaign. Okay, well, doesn't this sound a little familiar? Whatever. I bet nothing ever comes of it. The Huronia West OPP did at approximately 1:55 a.m. on November 12, 2016, respond to a reported break-and-enter at a residence in the Creemore area belonging to a local politician. Upon arrival, Huronia West OPP members investigated the incident and found that no break-and-enter occurred, although the residential alarm did sound. So, we got no proof of anything. But of course, Nick Cavalis was quick to react and told the National Post, "This is how the left operates, and we know that." Okay. Asked to explain, he didn't. Of course not. Looking very Trump campaign. Very Trump. That must piss off O'Leary because that was going to be his angle. And then this article goes on to say Leach is believed to be one of the front runners in the race. Look at the numbers. All this press. She's still nowhere. Continued a strategy that began under Harper of trying to pitch to quote-unquote everyday Canadians while railing against the elite. Bullshit. She's compared her populist approach to that of President-elect Trump. Although she says she didn't endorse him, nor does she approve of everything he's done. Oh, no, of course not. That would be suicide to say that publicly. Fellow candidate Chris Alexander, the former immigration minister who was at Leach's side in last year's election when Conservatives proposed a barbaric cultural practices tip line, told reporters Sunday that he thought some of the things Leach has been saying so far in the race were regrettable, and she was expressing views he does not share. I don't want to see Canadian politics go in that direction, Alexander said. Well, that's all well and fine, but maybe it's because you've got the personality of a 1x8 plank of spruce that you don't want that type of attention either. During the lunch before the event, which was sold out, as many as 500, and this debate was open to any member of the public who bought a ticket, not party members. The lunch was dubbed speed dating by candidate Aaron O'Toole, as the 10 candidates in attendance at that time moved from table to table, meeting potential supporters as food was served. That's interesting. I've seen the Wild Rose Party do the same thing. So it's really not something new, it's just new for this race. The questions asked ranged from firearms regulations, defense spending, nuclear energy, the age of consent, their approach to federal-provincial relations, and a philosophical question, how conservatives could better connect with millennials. Despite Kelly Leach talking on and on about how party members want to talk about values, there was no mention of this topic at all during the actual debate portion. Chong drew the strongest reactions with his carbon tax, but he also drew some of the loudest cheers on other issues. Chong's policy does run counter to the position taken by the party currently by interim leader Ambrose. But at the end of the day, Chong remained diplomatic and said people are passionate on both sides of various issues. That's what we need in this leadership race. A frank, strong debate on the ideas to take this country forward. Okay, well, yeah. As conservatives, we need to fight for the things we believe in, and that's exactly what I intend to do in this leadership race. Well, that's fine. Just it's too bad that most of the ideas that you people believe in are out of date. So we could see anywhere from, in my estimation, 9 to 15 candidates at the end of the year. So again, it's looking very, very similar to the Republican speed dating setup from more than a year ago now. Where the Conservative Party goes, I don't really care. But they are a force in the Canadian political scene. I don't forget. Nobody should forget what they did. And when so far you have 12 apostles of Emperor Harper, could it get worse with an outsider? Yeah, O'Leary could join. Then it would look very similar to what we saw in the Republican leadership event. But what they do, hey, give them enough rope. I'm fine with that. A lot more to come. Next week on The View Up Here, it will be episode 107. It will be exactly 100 episodes since my first guest, the irrepressible Frankie James. Frankie will be back next week. Frankie will want to talk about what comes next after Tuesday, November 8th, in the United States. Frankie wants to talk about the real loser of the American election, the planet Earth. There's absolutely nothing to prevent President Trump from dismantling a lot of the environmental protections and systems in the United States. A lot of that he can do by executive order. He's in charge of the departments and the United States cabinet. As we've seen already, some of the people being named as finalists for certain secretaryships are very bipolar to the mission of that department. So we're going to see some bloodletting within the U.S. government. There's no doubt about it. Talk about how this election affects planet Earth. Also going to talk about how a lot of the things that Trump alluded to on the campaign trail, since he basically put out one policy in the entire year and a half, and it's a piece of shit tax policy. But the things that he was talking about on the campaign trail are mostly simply unconstitutional in the United States. Sound familiar, Canadians? Indeed it does. But that's also another issue. And, this is why I'm convinced that the Americans were sold a larger bill of goods than Canada bought. These people think that somebody who's never been in public office, has no idea how government works, is going to show up in town by themselves as one person, and they're going to change the way things work. Capitol Hill has been eating people like this for breakfast for centuries. Get real. Take a look at it. I'm going to ask Frankie about how things are going with her activism work and her volunteering. Of course, her sister Teresa Pocock was rescued from the Ontario mental health system. Teresa has started her own campaigns for awareness and support, and the James Gang are helping out with those efforts. And I'm just curious to see how Frankie's doing. I told her I'd never forget she was my first guest, and I went back to her to say it's been 100 shows. Would you come back? She said, yes, I would love to. So there we go. I'm looking forward to next week. Maybe we'll even try and take it back to the style of the show at that time. I will be asking Frankie if there's any tunes she wants to hear. As always, the guests decide the content on The View Up Here. And that is next week. So, we took a look at Phoenix, we took a look at the Senate, and we took a look at the CPC Roadshow. Just trying to keep you all up to date, more or less. More or less. Now I'm going to end the show with one more Canadian tune. I think the lyrics are kind of, end of the road for what all these politicians are really after anyway. Thank you for listening to The View Up Here. We'll see you next week with the return of Frankie James. Good night.